Mia Diawara is a partner at Lowercarbon Capital, and before she was there, which is what, you came there about a year ago, something like that?
November, actually.
November, not long ago.
Feels like a year.
But she worked for TPG, a giant private equity colossus, working on a lot of internal climate projects there. She was a Bain consultant. But can I throw in the thing about Mali? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
She's half Malian, and she spent a lot of her life in Bamako, Mali, in the summers when she wasn't going to high school and stuff in Colorado, right? So one of the reasons I mentioned that is, even though I said at the beginning we wanted to take a global view, I don't think we have done that enough throughout the day. So if we can do that here, and maybe I'll force you to do a little bit of that. So anyway, Andrew Beebe is a managing director at Obvious Ventures, which is a VC fund that is, what's his name? The guy who started it.
Ev Williams.
Ev Williams, sorry, from Twitter started it. And I just had a mental block there. But Andrew's been there since 2015, but he also, prior to that, had a long career in clean energy. He actually was the CEO of, I think, Bill Gross's first climate tech company, called Energy Innovations, right? Yeah.
2003, yeah. He was the only one crazy enough, equally crazy to focus on clean energy back then.
And to hire you, right. But you did a decent job with it, although, it was hard, and you sold it, and then you went to a big solar company, Next Era Energy, so you know a lot about climate tech as a practitioner as well as an investor. Now, finally, Avra van der Zee is COO of Elemental Accelerator, which is a very unusual organization. I guess there are others that are somewhat similar, but it's a nonprofit that does for-profit investing, but has a very strong commitment to a community analog to the for-profit activity. So they might invest, maybe I'll let you explain it further, obviously, but they might invest in a community group in order to help the for-profit company make better ties to their customer base and kind of solve some of the kinds of problems that Suzanne Singer was mentioning earlier. But we're really here to just take the temperature of climate tech investing. And we've heard a lot, especially from Bill Gross, about the, climate tech 1.0 and its failures, which Andrew personally experienced. But the question is it different now, and what's different? So can I start with you, Mia, on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me? Is the mic picking up?
Yep.
Great. So I think there are a number of things that are different about this run of climate investment. So first is just the scale of capital. People like to make comments about how capital intensive it is to invest in hardware, how capital intensive it is to invest in deep tech. First of all, that's not specific to those industries, but also where the problem emerges is when you have capital-intensive industries and a gap in the capital that's available to support those investments over the full course of their scaling. The scale of climate capital is fundamentally different now than it was in the clean tech 1.0 era. So $37 billion in venture capital invested in climate in 2021. That's as compared to $25 billion from 2006 to 2011 over the full course of those 4 to 5 years. And so the scale of capital is different. And I think that that's something that is underappreciated, and that's venture alone, right? If you add private equity to that figure, I think it's over $50 billion invested in climate tech, and that keeps growing. So that's one thing. The second is the cost to start climate companies has fundamentally declined, and I think Andrew is much more credentialed in speaking to this, having built companies in both Web 1.0 and Clean Tech 1.0, but it's there are similar trends here as the Web 1.0 era. So building a company in the early 2000s or late 1990s in software was expensive. Right, and that cost has declined as a result of cloud hosting and ubiquitous internet and open source software. Right, you can build a software app now with no code tools, and I think we're seeing similar trends in the climate tech space. So machine learning, computing power, AI, all of these things and advancements in these technologies are allowing founders to build and iterate much more rapidly at a much lower cost than was possible a decade ago. And so what that means, we have companies in our portfolio who are building, modeling airplanes and optimizing and engineering, designing airplanes in computers or nuclear fusion reactors in computers.
Because Zap is one of your portfolio companies.
That's right, as well as Hart Aerospace, and can optimize design before they even need to invest a single dollar in CapEx. And I just think the scale of innovation and what that unlocks in terms of speed is fundamentally different. Some folks will hear from Sarah Richardson at Microbuyer later today. And Microbuyer is leveraging informatics and automation as a platform to engineer and identify and essentially wrangle microbes for chemical production, to decarbonize chemical production and address the 88% of chemicals that industrial scale biotech can't serve right now. And so advancements in all of those things, as well as in biology and electrochemistry. I think that the cost of mapping a genome has fallen 100,000% in the past 15 years. Kind of all converge to help to spur the pace of innovation in this space.
Good.
And there's a skeleton key as well there of cheap renewables. Renewables benefit from subsidies to this day, and I think the unit economics are fundamentally different for some of these companies as well. So I'll pause there. I have more thoughts.
That's a lot of good, optimistic stuff. Okay, Andrew, what do you think?
I'm going to yield my time back to her. That was awesome. And no, crypto, that's what's changed. You said I was supposed to talk about.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Not crypto. Even though the air conditioning load in here is using more energy than all of crypto, I'm freezing. But no, seriously, I will add.
It's the opposite problem you usually have, by the way. But
right.
Anyway, sorry about that.
I'll just add a couple of things because Mia laid out some amazing stats and also sort of the technology piece of it. The first, just from a personal standpoint, is Bill Gross still here? I would just say.
Back there.
Yeah, so Bill, I have a personal debt of gratitude to Bill Gross because it was 20 years ago that I had sold an internet company. I thought, like a lot of people you hear today, I thought, okay, I did something cool in technology. Now I want to solve a new, really big challenge. And I found myself wandering in this wilderness looking for other people who cared about, we didn't even call it climate then, but about solving a lot of these challenges. Like the climate crisis, was not a thing. Climate change was a thermostat setting. Al Gore's movie hadn't come out. There was really no one talking about it, but Bill Gross was. And all the stories he told are true. I mean, he's been working on it even for decades before that. So when we came together, we were on this quest to find people who would join with us in the journey. And it was really tough sledding. It was very difficult. So the first thing I would add, in addition to the insane amount of, not insane, but wonderfully insane amount of capital coming into the space, is the talent. And Bill had a great way of pulling people from Caltech, and we were able to build a really wonderful ragtag team of talent coming together around solving the energy challenges and making solar affordable. But it was, we were pulling people in, and now everyone is pushing in. It is extraordinary. And the story told about Yetming Chang, the professor at MIT earlier today, is true. He was telling me about the new students coming in as freshmen, and everybody wants to work on this. So there's a talent story, but there's also sort of a people story. One is everybody wants to work on this, but even people who go and work at Ford or GM, they want to work on electrification. Farley tells the story of talking to the people on the factory floor who are transitioning to the F-150 Lightning and how excited they are to take their skills from building internal combustion engines, which were some of the best in the business, to these electric motors and different drivetrains. And so I think it's not just a generational thing. I think the entire zeitgeist of humanity is trying to turn toward this. So talent for startups, we have extraordinary talent versus what we had before. I know, because I was one of that talent in the beginning, that, it's quite a different group that's happening. So that's another big piece of it.
Really good stuff so far. Okay, Avra.
Yeah.
Just describe quickly what you do and how because you invest in a lot of climate companies too.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'll start with Elemental, and then I'll talk about what's different. So, as you mentioned, Elemental's a nonprofit investor, and we've invested in over 130 portfolio companies over a dozen years. We've been investing in innovative technologies across the climate spectrum. And some of the technology or some of the portfolio companies you might recognize are, to tie it back to the Techonomy community. One of our portfolio companies is Heliogen, the unparalleled Bill Gross, who keeps coming back.
I didn't know that. That's right.
Yeah, and Block Power is electrifies small and moderate income buildings electrifies buildings in low and moderate income neighborhoods, and that ties back to what Lucas was saying. At Microsoft, they received a Microsoft Innovation Fund grant, and another one of our portfolio companies is Carbon Cure, which was part of that pioneering. They recycle CO2 into concrete, and they were part of the pioneering Stripe, carbon negative credit initiative. So it's all kind of connected here, thanks to the convening that you brought us to. So what we do at Elemental is, in addition to investing money, we provide holistic support to our portfolio companies. We really, in doing this work over a decade, we've seen that in order to address the climate crisis where it is, we not only need to scale technologies rapidly, but we also need to work on redesigning the systems that got us here. So we provide this holistic support that looks to forge public-private partnerships between our portfolio companies and corporates and community groups and government. We've launched a policy lab to help unlock regulatory tailwinds. And we work to center equity, diversity, equity, and justice within our portfolio companies, but also in the broader ecosystem. So that's what Elemental does, and what we've seen over the last decade, that there is a lot that has changed that makes this moment so powerful and provides so much optimism. So I would say at least 4 things, right? One, technologically, we have the tech, we just need to scale it. Mia talked about some of the amazing innovations and the cost reductions. I think culturally and politically, we're seeing corporations with net zero targets. We're seeing momentum with global and local initiatives. Personally, that's the third one. I think people feel climate change. It's like that scene in Don't Look Up, where all of a sudden the comet is barreling toward Earth, and all of a sudden people start to panic. We've all had a moment where we see the comet, and I think that's part of why we're getting such fantastic talent into the space. And then financially, and I think Mia talked about a lot of the innovations in the space and the number, demonstrating the numbers pouring in. But I think one of the interesting parts too is I think we have a wizened investor community that now understands the complexity of climate technology and climate investing. It's not just one technology. It's not just software. It's not just hardware. It's not just careers. It's not just data infrastructure. It's not one route to market. You've got B2B and B2C and B2G. It's not one climate capital stack. You need all of the levers. You need, government grants and private equity. And so with that, I think it's a very different world. I remember when I helped scale a company called Jump, which was a micromobility company. And I remember we were raising money in 2014, so a good decade after you. We're getting your toes wet in the space. And it was a joke. I mean, it was like we were a custom hardware company that had to deal with government procurement. I mean, it was miserable. And so I think we're in a new world where the entire investing community understands the complexity of the market and understands that collaboration is needed. And that's what's so exciting to me, is that with that need for collaboration and that understanding of the complexity, I think we can go back to the systems approach. And I think the effective investing in this space will be an investing approach that takes the holistic view, that looks to a multiplicity of partners, that looks to create space for equity and space for expertise and new voices in the room.
That's really all good stuff. And Mia, I know you actually said to me that you thought ethics were key to success in this arena, and which I would assume dovetails a little bit with what Avra was just saying. Just quickly talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, so you in the prep for this session had mentioned, asking us, and I hope I don't steal your thunder on
No.
maybe the last question here, but
Go right ahead.
whether we were optimists. And I think folks working in climate in some ways have no choice but to be optimistic. I think honestly that pessimism in some ways is a privilege, because it means that you think you're going to weather the storm okay. And you mentioned, so I have family in West Africa. The vast majority of my extended family lives in Mali. I grew up spending summers there. Mali is in a region of the world that is it is set to experience temperature increases as a result of climate change that are 1.5 times the global average. And when I think about optimism, so one of the things we look for when we invest in founders is a sense of inevitability, that these are the solutions that are going to change the world. And frankly, that inevitability is contagious. And I come out of conversations so energized, and I'm so optimistic about the technology. But the technology is not one piece of it, is just one piece of it. To borrow language from the Climate Justice Alliance, in this circumstance, transition is inevitable, justice is not. And I think that we need to be thoughtful with how we approach building and scaling those technologies, and keep in mind the communities that stand to lose the most, and think about ways that we can take this capital that is flowing toward climate and take the benefits as a result of these technologies and make sure that they are having materially positive impact within those communities as well. And so,
and in a global way.
And in a global way,
Yeah,
sorry,
right.
which is to say those communities, for the most part, exist outside of the United
Mostly
States, outside of the
yeah,
global
yeah.
north, and where a lot of the capital and innovation is concentrated, and rightfully so. But we need to make sure that those solutions are benefiting the folks in those regions, and that we look at this transformation as an opportunity to transform livelihoods as well, and think about this in a holistic and humanist perspective.
I want to ask any of you, but maybe, Andrew, you worked with Bill. Bill said on stage very compellingly and forcefully that this is a way to make a hell of a lot of money, right? And is that sinking in? Is that the presumption that the LPs have? And in other words, this is all good for world, for the climate, that you're innovating, that we're finding these companies, but it could really be a great way to get rich too, right?
Yeah, and pass. Saka, Saka talked a lot about this too, but Lowercarbon. Absolutely, of course, and Bill talked about this is just an extraordinary period of massive innovation, and it's very, very exciting. It is venture capital, so there will be losses. Like people have to. I don't want to go through this thinking that every single deal versus the last time around, every single deal is going to be.
Oh, with
home run.
SPACs, that's not true anymore. Sorry, go.
Even more so. So so I think that there's massive potential upside, and I would say the LP, most of the LP view is that this is about the next economic expansion opportunity, and that's why the money, and particularly the consistent institutional money, comes in. There are probably some that are just thinking a little bit more altruistically, but the vast preponderance, and the TPG $7 billion climate raise that was announced this morning, like all of those things are all about making money because of the potential transition we're going through.
They announced a $7 billion
Climate only,
Climate,
right?
specifically climate focused.
Building on possibly work that you did there, presumably.
Yes,
That's right.
yes, in fact, and looking at how we can measure the impacts of those investments from a climate avoided emission standpoint. Yeah.
Okay, we're short on time because we're running late and all that, but we are going to have a continued breakout on this. But I want to give a chance for at least one audience question before we wrap. Okay, there, please, one of our favorite people. Yeah, we got to do this pretty fast, but we do need to do it.
And of course, I met Bill Gross 45 years ago, so
Tell us who you are now.
Okay, I mean,
Wait, identify.
Sorry, Jim Fruchterman, founder of Benetech and Tech Matters.
Good.
And so, Mia, you touched on this. Obviously, Suzanne talked about this, but the world looks a lot more like the experience that Suzanne described for 90% of humanity, and much of today is really focused on making a lot of money, which almost certainly means that 90% of humanity is not going to, by and large, benefit. So how are we going to actually shift that? Because this is the climate crisis, right? It affects everybody, and very few of those 90% of the people are thinking about mitigation, right? They're thinking about, how do I make more money and send my kids to school and keep grandma from dying? So what are we going to do differently? Because I just hear more of the same mainly today.
Avra, you try that one.
Throw me under the bus here. No, easy question to answer. No, that's a lot to unpack. I think that we would say at Elemental that we believe, actually, this is the optimist in me, that taking this systems approach, right, it actually yields good returns also. It's this multidimensional notion of value creation, right? This idea that working with community groups to understand market dynamics, to help co-design products. And we have a framework and we tailor it to each individual portfolio company to see what works for them, to see what matches the business model. But really, it's about bringing all of these system redesign notions into investing, and we're seeing that it's starting to happen. At investor conferences, you have a nonprofit on stage, right? Like we're elevating the conversation to bring these ideas, hopefully to sort of productize them and share them and open source them, because actually what we see is that our portfolio companies do tremendously well with this approach, right? That it is actually, the returns are high and the community benefit is high. So I don't think it's an either or, but a framework shift that needs to happen. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it takes having the conversation. It takes convening conferences that bring different voices and perspectives to the stage. So I would say, we're on a path, optimistically.